of migrating the MTEF line item budget to activity-based budgeting in 2014. The chairperson, because of his dedication to duty, was in April 2018, after the restructuring of the ministry, appointed as the principal deputy financial secretary. The position he held and performed creditably. He pioneered most economic and financial reform at the ministry. And in June 2023, he was elevated to the enviable position of financial secretary as the principal advisor on economic and financial policies. As a financial secretary, yes, please. Ladies, honorable minister, ladies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome our dynamic financial secretary, Mr.
Thank you very much, PDFS. I think you have an A in your thesis if you want to introduce financial sector. Thank you very much. We will not be defending anyone's budget this morning, so I still want to appeal those that are sitting at the rows after the door. Please come. There are spaces here because most of the action will be taking place at this end. So just feel free to migrate, please. I will not ask you to defend your budget this morning. I will not be asked. But for us just to have everyone's rapt attention as the program goes ahead. So thank you very much. Honorable Vice President, Honorable Minister of Finance and Deputy Minister of Finance, Honorable Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Chairman of the Parliamentary Finance Committee, and our able representative for Civil Society Organization of BAM, Mr. Abubakar, Ministers of Government, Deputy Ministers, Members of Parliament, our development partners present here this morning as well, all stakeholders in the budget process. Let me welcome you on behalf of the Ministry of Finance to this year's policy hearings. Of course, we all know the policy hearings is the curtain raiser for us to start discussions around the budget process for the subsequent year. So we are talking of 2025 budgets. So based on provisions in our PFM Act and the Constitution of Sierra Leone, we are starting the consultative process in putting that budget together by all coming here today to discuss what will be the underlying policies that will drive the budget presentation to Parliament later this year by the Minister of Finance. Last year, by now, we hadn't launched the NDP, but we have hindsight of what were the issues that will be in the NDP based on the manifesto that was presented by the government, especially on the Big Five. I think it was after the policy hearings, after presentation of the budget in Parliament, then the NDP was launched. But this year we have proper grip of the NDP now that it has been launched. We now know the issues that are in the National Development Plan. And interestingly, like we say now, it is for almost 6 years, from 2024 to 2030 of implementation. So 2025 effectively will be the first full year implementation of the programs, projects, and activities that are in the National Development Plan, which has been approved and presented to the people of this country. So the policies we are going to discuss, the budget hearings we're going to have from next week, they will focus on the clusters in the National Development Plan and how sector ministries are going to align their programs, their budgets to the objectives of the NDP. So I'll make sure every year we can monitor and measure the progress we are making in implementation of the NDP, because that's what's driving the budget, the resource allocation. That's why this year, even the themes of the budget discussion, we've been able to classify them over several days of the discussions. So for the first 2 days, we said let's just discuss about fees alone, and then we discuss about human capital development, we discuss about infrastructure and technology, we discuss about public administration and governance, and we discuss about youth empowerment programs. So that at the end of the budget discussions themselves, stakeholders will go home well informed about what MDs are doing to address the issues that are in the NDP, and not just to present to the public what they want to implement as a ministry or sector, or how they intend to fulfill the objectives in the NDP. So that's how the discussions have been shaped from next week onwards. So today, we'll start by discussing the broad policies that will drive the budget. So policy makers here that have been well selected to make statements from the Ministry of Finance, Planning, and even up to the level of the Honorable Vice President himself will help to shape those policies which will guide us as we formulate the budgets. The budget, as we know, is not prepared in a vacuum. Of course, it has to be done within a framework within what we believe the country can generate in terms of resources and how we believe that can be spent. So therefore, as part of the process of developing the budget, we are already in discussions with development partners also to see how they will come in to support the budget for 2025. So we'll discuss our projections on revenue, we'll discuss our projections on expenditure, we'll discuss our projections on the broad macroeconomic variables from growth, how we see our country to grow, or our economy next year, inflation, exchange rates, and the rest. And then they will give us their own inputs to help shape the framework, which eventually will put in the context of the budget, and the minister will table it to Parliament later this year. So this is why we are all here to take part in that process. Over the past 1 year, we definitely recorded significant economic gains from where we are about 12 or 13 months ago. We've seen stable increase in GDP. GDP growth is moved from 3.2% last year. We're projected to grow by 4.2% next year. Inflation, we've seen from the mid-double digits of 54-55% October last year. Now it's now in the lower 30%. And we expect that during the course of 2025 budgets, we'll definitely target inflation to come to a single digit. We can do it, and I believe with your support, we'll get there. The exchange rate also has been stable from October to date, and we intend to keep it at that. Why? Because we've instituted policies collaboratively with the Bank of Sierra Leone and other economic agents to make sure we relate and respond to the issues that affect the supply and demand of forex in our economy, and how we put policies in place to address that. And even work closely with the banking system to make sure these policies, some we have enacted through laws, are well implemented so that we don't have a reverse of the situation, but rather we would like to see a situation where our exchange rate will improve, even coming to 1 or 10 euros to $1. I believe we'll all be happy for that, and that will bring even more value to our emoluments, because we know emoluments are really depreciated as a result of the exchange rate depreciation over the past years. So there has been loss in real consumption of citizens in terms of the income. So therefore, these things are really at the top of our minds when we do the budget, to make sure we handle the macroeconomic variables very, very strongly, so that these people feel the impact. When people say they don't feel the impact of the budget, the impact of the economy, it's because the indicators are not going towards the right direction. But when these indicators speak towards the right direction, then every Sierra Leone and every citizen, of course, will feel the impact in your pocket. Budget execution has been challenging, of course, over the past 1 year because we are trying to consolidate, looking at where we came from in terms of exposure, fiscal exposures, and wide budget deficits. We are allowing budget deficits of double digit of over 11% of GDP, which was really out of balance. Now we brought that down to about 5% of GDP, our budget deficit. So which is why you see all the economic indicators really driving towards the right direction. In the midst of that, we've been able to pay public sector wages and emoluments every month up to now as we speak without accumulating arrears to our teachers, lawyers, security forces, doctors, health sector workers, civil servants. We've been paying salaries and emoluments, members of parliament, ministers, political appointees. We can all attest to that, including benefits for rent and others. Oh yes, we've been able to do that. Debt service payments has been a burden because debts are maturing almost on a weekly basis, and we have to make sure we are credible. We don't want partners to say Sierra Leone as defaulted. We are following the international news of other countries that have defaulted in their public debts, and they are being taken out of the economic programs for breathing institutions. But we have been able to keep our head above waters, and we're honoring our debt service obligations, and we intend to continue to do so. At the same time, we've been implementing capital projects, still on roads, energy, water supply. We've been paying quite significant amounts of resources to these sectors, and we see those projects are moving on. Local councils, they are here, they can attest. It's now 8 months in the year, but we've been able to do 2 transfers to local councils in the midst of all these challenges. They can attest to that. And we intend to do more even before the end of this year. We've been able to meet critical security-related expenditures at the same time for the first 8 months of this year. And we've heard about the energy challenge we faced in the first half of the year. Of course, part of the discussion we'll be having in the afternoon will target, we focus on the energy sector, what are the risks there, and what the ministry is doing in collaboration with other agencies of government to really handle this energy crisis and resolve it once and for all. I'll tell you, from last year to now, we've paid a little over $40 million as direct energy subsidies alone to our IPP providers. So these and others are the challenge that we've been having in mobilizing resources, but at the same time, these are the areas that are driving the bulk of the resources in the budget, which is why yesterday we were in discussions with the ACC preparing their new anti-corruption strategy, and they drew members from the public, independent people to look at the strategy. And whilst they were consulting, I think they met some of you MDAs, and the main complaint was they are not getting your allocations on time. Ministry of Finance is not releasing allocations on time. So they were asking us, what is our response to that? So that when they capture it in the strategy, they will bring up recommendations on how those challenges could be addressed. But when we took our time, the minister, the deputy, myself, colleagues, to take them through all of these challenges that we're facing and how we've been addressing them, uncertainties, security environment, political environment, energy, and all of these things, how we've been battling to handle it and make sure there is some form of stability, peace, and tranquility in the country, and we see things are moving on quite, in a more improved way compared to the past. I think they were able to appreciate that a trade-off has to be made. If we are to meet all of these expenditures, all of these critical programs of government to make sure that the country operates smoothly, then definitely from the same resources, we cannot at the same time be able to release allocations to MDAs on a timely basis as we have loved to. But regardless of that, we believe most MDAs have been able to receive resources from the budget, though perhaps not up to 40–50% so far this year. But we intend, and I'm sure the minister will speak to that in the statement, what we'll do to address that before end of this year. Even the hospitals, again, we've been able to make transfers to them this year so far. So these are some of the things that have been driving budget execution so far this year. And in the context of that, January to now, We've done all of that from our domestic resources. I think we need to give a round of applause to NRA, to the National Revenue Authority, you know, and the way we've been intervening, even from our banks, to support from the central bank in our primary markets, to support budget implementation. There has been no budget support disbursements from January to August, but yet still we've been able to implement all of these programs to date with no areas built up, especially on critical public sector, which is emoluments or debt service default. So which means the NRA, for the first half of the year, we exceeded revenue targets by 380 million. That's 380 billion new loans by the National Revenue Authority from January to June alone. Why? Because of policies, measures, reforms we've put in place, supported automation of most of the tax handles. We know there are still leakages, and we are working every day to see how we tackle those leakages and how we make sure that we get all the revenues. When we sat with the Vice President a day or two ago, they were drawing our attention to some of these areas that we need to focus on to address leakages. Even to some of us, they are like news to our ears. That tells you there are still a lot for us to do in addressing revenue leakage. So just imagine if we can exceed revenue targets by over 380 billion, and it down of those leakages, perhaps we'll have even double and meet the targets for the first half. Resource mobilization for the first, from last year to now, we've done very well as well in terms of how we've been engaging with our partners. As we speak, we have just done the first engagement of the International Monetary Fund to discuss our first half performance with them, and the discussions, I'm happy to report, went well. So in September, we've been having official negotiations with the IMF here in Freetown for us to start the successor economic extended credit facility program with the IMF in September, which hopefully the board of the IMF will approve in October or November this year. And the approval of that program will also qualify for a new program with the IMF, two programs, which they call the one that addresses climate challenges, the Resilience Sustainability Trust Facility Program, which they will also automatically qualify for. And that's combined two programs will be getting over 480 million disbursement from the fund over the next 3 years, once we succeed in signing those two programs with the IMF by November and February next year. The World Bank also were in discussions with our budget support program for this year. I want to encourage all ministries, departments, and agencies that are implementing the development policy actions, the DPO triggers for this year. We have just a little over 2 months for us to meet those triggers so that the World Bank also can go to their board and approve our budget support program of 65 million for this year. Also, of course, you followed in the news in April last year we were in Washington, D.C. to negotiate the MCC program, which so far has gone very well, and we see the MCC board has approved the program for Sierra Leone to address our energy sector of about $480 million. We hope that that program will also be signed soon by His Excellency the President, so that the effective implementation will start. Already, we're in engagement with sector ministries and others, key players, on how we can begin to implement the conditions precedent for the disbursement under the MCC. So work is already underway. The European Union will also in discussions with them to resume budget support operations this year. And by end of this year, also expect the European Union to disburse about 12 million euros to the budget. So these are all the platform that we've laid. So which means going forward for the medium term, we've really moved on in terms of resource mobilization, we've set the framework for revenue mobilization. So it's about how we put all of this in the context of our budget in addressing the National Development Plan objectives. So that is what we'll be looking at over the next couple of days or weeks in putting the budgets together. So this afternoon we'll start the discussions. We will not take all the 5 areas because of time, but the budget hearings will cover them, of course. So this afternoon we'll be looking at Freetown again, the renewable energy, human capital development in the context of health for all, how we improve our health service system in the country, and education, quality education. And of course, then we want to look at technology, because there is a lot of discussions now about how technology can aid economic development. So we'll be listening to a discussion or presentation on the PRSP, the NDP cluster on technology, specifically to see how we can support that through the budget and how technology can be used to implement economic programs and support growth. So that is what we'll be engaging for this morning to the afternoon, and then we'll adjourn, and then Monday we'll start the hearings bilaterally with ministries and the Ministry of Finance effectively. So let me once again welcome you all to the budget hearings, and we hope you will take part. Feel free to contribute in the discussions when they are open. We are here to listen to you. It's not only for us to tell you what we want to do, but to listen to you. You can guide us better on how we can shape these policies and how we can put them in the context of the budget, so that once it is presented to Parliament, we can own it as our budget and implement it together, so that we can have the results we are looking forward to as a country. So thank you very much, and I'll stop here so that I don't take on what my policy would like to say, but to begin to invite them now to the podium to make statements. So without wasting much time, we'll start with our civil society representative from the Budget Advocacy Network. They have been very instrumental in supporting us in shaping government policies. They could be critique at times, but for me, I always love when they come from the critique angle, because that's where we learn. So let me invite Abubakar Kamara from BAN to make a statement. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause.
His Excellency, Vice President, Ministers, colleagues, civil societies, diplomats, journalists, good morning again. Firstly, let me thank government by extension, Minister of Finance, for not only providing space for civil society to participate in a session like this, but for also include us in critical technical committees on revenues and expenditures. This shows that they value our commitment and will uphold that commitment and continue to provide valuable input to support government interventions. I also want to thank the Ministry of Finance for improving its scores on the open budget survey from 45 to 55. It's a progress, even though the minimum requirement is 60%. Civil society, as you all know, we play a critical role in public financial management around transparency, accountability, and participation. Of course, one of the things we are known for is advocacy. And civil society in Sierra Leone has grown. We have formed ourselves to thematic areas based on expertise. For example, we have BAN, who is the lead on public financial management. We have those in mining, we have those in other sectors. So we need that work. So around the PFM, we've always been lobbying for fiscal policies that will really push the country before. We've lobbied for laws and regulations that promote transparency and accountability. For example, when we had that the government would be reviewing the Public Debt Management Act, we came together and looked at the whole act from the transparency and accountability angle. We developed clauses. So one of the things we are doing now, we are not only criticizing or lamenting, we are also providing alternatives. I can say that we have presented to the Minister of Finance clauses, proposed clauses that care to us improve debt transparency and accountability for their constitution. And we have also developed a position paper. I have copies that we have shared. So this just also provides the role we play in terms of improving public financial management. Of course, we monitor budgets and expenditure to ensure that they be utilized for the right purpose. You know, when I received the letter, I contacted a number of CSOs, and a CSO from Bo called me and said, I want you to look at local councils. You see, because I visited local council, and there are a lot of complaints around late transfer. In fact, I've just mentioned that. And it's a critical challenge. And I looked at the Accountant General report for June, which covers from January to June. For the operating expenses for local councils, nothing was transferred as of June, based on Minister of Finance. But it's a concern civil society at the district level are raising, which what the FS has mentioned, some of the challenges they are facing to meet those timely disbursements. On audits, of course, our goal here is to ensure that public resources are utilized effectively. So we see a new vigor at the PAC, and I want to say thanks to the Honorable Tawa and the committee for really doing the people's work the way it's supposed to be. Because the level of scrutiny the PAC is now providing is really commendable. And they have also set up a structure to follow up on the recommendations. For which society are included. We will support that process. And we support government to ensure that public resources are really utilized and they are accountable for. So Vice President, as Chair for the Ministerial for Local Councils, we are pleased to say that the gender budget at the local level is on the increase. However, Minister, at the MBA level, we are yet to realize a real practical gender budgeting. And it's something we continue to work with government to see how that can be improved. Because when we have gender budgeting, the impact will be massive. It's geared towards leaving no one behind. And I read the budget call circular, and there are new initiatives which society want to commend government on around green budgeting and child budgeting. And so we are calling for the MDAs when implementing initiative to be more transparent and accountable, so that we support that. It's a very good initiative. On inclusion, I'm happy that we are included in this process, but we did a report quite recently around the impact of downward GST 3 years back and the barriers. And there are a lot of issues which SMEs raised. And since it's a policy hearing, one of them has to do with, and I've started having a conversation with some members of the Ministry of Finance, and they are also working that right. How do we ensure that we have a tax system that will cater for the SME that will not create more burden on them? And there are issues also around including SMEs in policy discussion. Mind you, most of the policies, some of the policies, formulations, and laws has impact on small women enterprises. And they are competent women that have the capacity to discuss this issue with government. So they are calling for inclusion of SMEs to be part of the budget discussion. We know them, and they are very competent. On the revenue aspect, again, I also looked at the figures produced to NRA. They have exceed target based on January to June. But we as CSO, we are not only looking at transparency and accountability aspect. We also support the revenue mobilization that both at local and national level. Let me give an example. Two the base projects supported by USID, we have supported WordC to bring in over 26,000 new properties into the character system. And by our calculation, if only there is compliance of 30%, we will generate over 40 billion annually. And of course, the Minister of Development and the Minister of Finance will feel the relief which that will bring to our country. Mr. Minister, by the 33 of the budget speech last year, we introduced 65% import duties on rice. And we as CSOs wholly support the revenue mobilization drive geared towards supporting the feed salon. However, in this same hall, we are promised that based on the strategic plan for Ministry of Agriculture, that rice with rice importation will be reduced 25% yearly. And we saw when that 5% was increased. We know that the import is not the only factor affecting increase in price. There are a whole lot of factors. But we also saw what happened, what the business people did in terms of bringing some amount of increase in the price. And from that statement, another 5% will be included this year to make it 10%. What we as CSO is calling for now is, and what we are doing is, to wait when we have reached the stage to increase production, then we'll add up another 5% to make it 10%. Because what's going to happen is, once they add 5%, the price will increase. And of course, those that are going to suffer most are the poor and the vulnerable. And we saw it with statistics around Tonga, around the country. So that's our call for the society on the proposed to increase another 5%, make it 10% on import duties. Lastly, while we acknowledge the fact that the policy hearing and budget discussion is a very critical space to make input contribution on how the country is running. However, the issues around feedback from the Ministry of Finance is a concern that we have raised over the years. For example, last year the budget discussion finished on the 20th of October. On the 23rd, society presented a comprehensive report that is geared towards improving the process itself improving revenue generation, and improving expenditure management based on what was discussed. So what we are calling for, and again, it's part of the open budget recommendation, is how do we have that feedback mechanism so that when people come and participate, they will now realize that their input are taken or not actually taken. I want to conclude that CSOs will contribute to more transparent, accountable, and effective public financial management that will ultimately contribute to better governance and improved services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abubakar. I think